How's it going, everyone? Welcome, Eulero Gonzalez here again. And today we're going to explore now is this Vue dev tool that, unlike React, it has its own particularly dev tools. And now we're gonna see what is the subtle difference between Vue DevTools and React DevTools. And this will be now something very interesting. So far we have looked at the way of how can we describe user interface with React, what is the problem that React is solving, as well as Vue, right? So Vue is a reactive compiler optimized rendering system, which means that you're gonna pass now particularly objects with all of these configurations, first with the reactive data as well as these configuration objects, that you can now act upon that reactive data using computer property, which is usually for that, or watch as a way to now trigger some computations whenever a particularly reactive value change. This is when we use, for example, this is when we perform our input and output, or this side effects, right? For example, network calls, so AJAX calls, DOM manipulations, or even the browser APIs, talking to the local storage. This is similar to use effect in React 18, right? So far, so good. Now, what happened here is that as the time we want us to now add some interactivity. So Vue have now this property called method where you can define all of your function handlers and then attach them to the DOM. So unlike now React, we don't need to attach that to anything. We're just going to now is pass these functions to the specific UI elements that we need to. And when it comes to render elements in React way, we look at we use heavily now functional programming, for example, mapping elements and apply this transformation to each one of these. So for example, if you want to render a collection of values, right? How you can now, as you iterate through each one of those elements to this data structure, as you map this to apply some transformation. The transformation here is that you're going to generate now is a new React element, or new create elements with all of this now transformations. And then you're going to return now is an array. But most of the time when you apply now a map, you return is the data structure that you are working, that you are working right. So it means that if you are working for a hash table, you're going to return a new hash table. That's the map operation. If you're going to work on an array, you're going to return an array, or in a binary tree, or if you're now working with monads, which is a functional programming data structure. I don't want to dive too much into that topic. This goes beyond the scope of this. But the whole point of this is that understand now what are the problems that we are dealing with, especially when we are writing our user interface, and how now the functional programming here say, hey, instead of doing this in an imperative way, which is a great thing for a lot of developers when they say, hey, things are more explicit, which means is increase the readability. However, those kind of things becomes very tedious, especially when you need to tell the computer, this is what I want to do, and you know that this is what you want to do. And here's the difference. Once you know what you want to tell to the computer, and that things, that predicates becomes repetitive, so you want to find a way to make it much more easy to work with, right? So you can now abstract what it's doing behind the scenes. And that's when we have now this functional approach. So where the idea here is to say, hey, here we're going to be more implicit in our code, but more explicit when you want to use this tool these particular functions. So, okay, there's some debates of that, and also I really enjoy this functional programming. I'm not an evangelist of the functional programming over OOP. It has its own particular way. It has its own use cases, and this use cases is useful when you want to now is, for example, keep transactions or guarantee some sort of transactions. This transaction nature of applying something or to transform something from one thing to another. So in any case, this is well, the way of how now you can deal with Vue and React. Okay, so now we're going to explore is the Vue Devtools, so Vue Devtools in today's video, Vue Devtools, as well as the React Devtool. Okay, so each one of them has its own particular way of doing things. And let me see if this is the latest. Exactly, Vue Devtool and React Devtools. Again, remember that at the end of the day, React is for creating user interface, so this particular tools is for that. Okay, it's important to know that. So here's when you can see now the component structures, as well as the profiler. Okay, and unlike now the Vue Devtools, here there are a couple things that you can do here. So if you get started here, this particular DevTool is something that we're gonna discuss in today's video. So for example, it's like time travel debugging, which is something that React applications by default they don't have that. They tell you, hey, because now we're about to, because we only care about is how we create our components and the data that we have in these components. This is what we want to know. We want to know is the component tree as well as the profiler here. It says, hey, how much time is taking to, right? So Vue Devtool not only provides live editing properties, okay, but also this time travel debugging. And this is because since this is a reactivity systems, Redux is now this application, this library that you can now connect to React to provide this time travel debugging, to provide this now state management applications. Okay, or this time state management state management. Yeah, this time travel debugging. And also, if you can use now a router, there is now a particular library called React Router that now use a concept like called context to actually is provide you now browser navigation here. So not only that, okay, Vue Devtool also have this Pinia integration. So there is a lot of mechanism and things that is going on behind the scenes that of course it takes inspiration from React and all of these particular libraries that is using behind the scenes. So for example, in the state management, like Redux, and the routing, like the routing, okay, as well as some of the extensions that we can use with state management, which is time travel debugging. But the TLDR is that it provides you live editing property, so you're gonna reflect those changes on that live editing property. Time travel debugging, which is thanks to the state management here, they're using Pinia for that. Okay, the tool collects all the emit events into single locations, allowing you to monitor, track custom events of your apps, including the source component, name, size, and payload of each event. The feature is useful for identifying performance bottleneck and optimizing your application. But this is the essential features of this, right? And all of this is mainly based on this, mainly based on this React, this way of how you can now create your components. And not only that, is that how you can now maintain the state of all of these different components that you create in your React application and delegate that management to the framework. This reactivity, leave that to the framework to view. This React. Okay, let's get into this.
And so I know that we've gone through all this, and some of you might be thinking, well, who builds web apps this way, right? Because after all, like every sort of modern tech stack you'll see always talks about build tools and that kind of thing. And to be honest, like progressive enhancement is very much a thing that continues to exist to this day, even though it's not talked about a lot, right? Code rewrites are very sexy, but the truth is, when you're dealing with enterprise systems, it's just not realistic to stop everything that we talked about before and write new features. But dropping in the CDN with Vue, having it progressively enhanced, that all works. Because we're not going to cover it at this point because we're going to move into build tools. But a lot of these things we're seeing here, they can be just abstracted into .js files, right? You can actually modularize your code. You can do a lot actually and make a fairly robust app. It doesn't have to all live inside of this single option. Like,
it's not realistic in the enterprise
systems.
systems.
To keep it all as a mental model. But eventually you can break it out, import JS into here, use it. Like, it can still scale pretty darn well. And so this image here, which I love, is like the cake, but then you get the frosting, then you get the candles, right? And so the credit here is to Tiffany Say. This is our blog post on what is progressive enhancement, why should you care. So definitely something that I do think modern web developers need to consider when it comes to the realities of upgrading their code base. And so this is a smashing article magazine by Sarah Drasner, who used to be on the Vue core team. And this is a great one because the title of this is Replacing jQuery with Vue.js, no build setup necessary. And this is also a very valid way of using Vue. It's like, if you know that only one page core team, and this is a great one because the title of this is Replacing jQuery with Vue.js, no build setup necessary. And this is also a very valid way of using Vue. It's like, if you know that only one page in your entire app, like because you're
replace jQuery with Vue.
Don't even need jQuery anymore. You could literally just drop Vue because I believe the CDN side is either roughly the same, if not Vue, if not slightly lower at this point.
Exactly.
But
it's
that's
like
actually a viable option now. You don't need
no
to
build,
as a framework. You can be just
no build step.
Activity that are sprinkled now. And finally, again, people are always skeptical. They're like, well, who's actually done it this way? Well, GitLab did it this way. GitLab used to actually be a Ruby on Rails app. It was soup-lens. So if anyone works with Ruby on Rails, you know that, especially back then, integrating node-based tool chains into that was extremely painful. And so, again, and also they needed to ship features, right? This was before they went public. They had customers they needed to meet the needs. So they couldn't stop everything and go, yeah, Rails is kind of outdated. We really would love to use a framework, so let's stop building stuff. They couldn't do that. So they had customers they needed to meet the needs. So they couldn't stop everything and go, yeah, Rails is kind of outdated. We really would love to use a framework, so let's stop building stuff. They couldn't do that. So what did they do? I'm trying to remember actually which page it was. I knew someone who was on the team that did this. They actually, let's just, for example, they had the sign-in page. And they said on the sign-in page, let's add Vue as a CDN. And let's just like add interactivity. And once they proved that that worked well, they went, okay, next one, what's like something we can hit that's like fairly low impact performance-wise that we can do? I think there was another one that they did. And that's what they did. They slowly added new features to the customer base while progressively migrating their apps to Vue. And then eventually when they had basically the tipping point of like, they had so much code in Vue that it made sense to like, let's take a couple weeks to like refactor our code to actually use the node tooling to like bring it all in. That's when they actually did that, but they proved their case rather than trying to just tell product, hey, just stop. We have this wonderful idea that if anyone has done ever a massive, app refactoring, it often doesn't go quite as planned, and then deadlines get pushed. But they were able to realistically do that, and so that's how GitLab is now running on Vue now. And so the reason I wanted to emphasize this method is because it's something that I think is often overlooked when people are thinking about recommending solutions to clients, and it's something that I want people to know about. So whenever you're working for someone or you think that this could be a good approach, you now know that this is here for you. So we've talked about CDNs, we've talked about working with just the index.html, but most projects are not going to be run that way. That's just the reality. Most people have bought in fully to the toolchain system, and so it's time that we did so too. For those who come from the Vue 2 ecosystem, you're probably used to scaffolding your app with Vue.
Exactly. This is now for build tools.
Webpack build tool chain, and if you haven't heard about it, it's called Vite. And one of the great things about Vite, basically what you need to know is that it's a bundler underneath that's helping to push sort of like front-end tooling to use more ES around it, which is the new, basically. Let's go ahead and create a project and see what that looks like, shall we?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, let's go to create now this thing at once. So now using is build tools. So create view app. That's right. Quick start here. We want to create now a new project here. Now it is time to use is the node.
To do that, we're going to run the command npm create view3 inside of our project. So I'm going to go ahead and just close this off now, and let's go ahead and open this up. npm create view at 3. And so one of the things that's really nice about the modern build tool chains these days is that you don't have to install a massive CLI on your computer, only to use it a couple times, maybe like a year or something. It's kind of being called on the fly because npm knows, oh, you want to temporarily install something? I'll basically bring down the package, I'll use it, and after that, it won't be on the machine. So for this one, I'm just going to call mine sandbox right now because I want to show you all what's inside, and then you all will have an opportunity to create your own, building on what we've been doing today. All right, so I've named it sandbox, and so at first glance you see add TypeScript. Your first impression might be, oh, I'm definitely not using TypeScript. Hit no. I'm going to say hit yes, and the short reason for that is because when Vue gives you the option to add the TypeScript, what it's saying is it's not saying you have to use TypeScript. It's saying we're going to configure everything so that if you ever choose to use TypeScript, it's really easy. No configuration needed. There'll be 1 or 2 lines of code we'll add to make it basically like ignore any TypeScript errors. But one of the things that I found that's really painful when it comes to code migrations is that people who want to start sprinkling in TypeScript, usually the build tool chain is what blocks them from doing that. Because they're like, oh, I just want to try types. And then it's like, oh, you have to look at this config file, and then you have to do a tsconfig. And then by the time they've like that obstacle to getting started, the thing here is that this is great for code bases in the sense that like you can only have to are new to the tool chain space, should be able to install here. So Vue.js enable mine. And it does a ton of stuff for you. Honestly, there could probably be a half-day lecture just on Volar alone. But know that it helps you out with syntax highlighting and a couple of other things as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and enable mine. And it does a ton of stuff for you. Honestly, there could probably be a half-day lecture just on Volar alone, right? The Vue Devtools does for us. It's used by running npm instances. Well, the components are the template element is actually a built-in thing to HTML. It's not just a Vue thing.
Is not to create this for the.
So to kind of review what just happened, because I know, remember how we passed this object? Are a lot of moving pieces to it. And so to just sort of dive right in, get your feet wet, what we're going to do for this exercise is go ahead and create a brand new project with create view inside of our directory that we've already been using. And this time you're going to rename it to whatever your show name -forum. So in my case, it'll be like avatar last airbender -forum. And then we're going to migrate the stuff that we've been doing inside of index.html into app.vue. For those that haven't upgraded their Node version in a while, if you're on anything less than 16, basically Vue doesn't play that well with some of the older versions because some of the modern libraries are actually basically have moved on. And so just so, again, this will probably be outdated by the time, because Node moves. And this time you're going to rename it to whatever your show name -forum. So in my case, it'll be like outdated by the time it comes to 18. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create our new app. So I'm going to do npm create view at 3.
Okay, so let me actually pull this repo. There you go. So git clone here, complete intro to Vue 3 workshop. There you got it. You already download all of this. And we want to now get into the Vue 3. So complete intro to this. And now, okay. And now, do things like npm create Vue 3 for that. Open up here. I prefer to open up with the. Yeah, I prefer to open up this with git clone. Now with cursor, cursor here. There we got it. But I want to open up is here. That's interesting. We get into the same mode. Anyway, open here. Right, from the master complete intro to this. Let's get into this. Don't save that, please. And okay, let's swap here to this one. Is this one? No. What about this? Why not? Cursor. This one. Exactly. Cursor. There you got it. All right. Good. So here we are. Let actually is move to that particular branch here. Okay. Check out exercise. You got it. Awesome. So what we're gonna do here is to create now a new Vue app. Okay. Exactly. So let's go to actually is create our Vue 3 app, right? And then understand what's going on behind the scenes. That's the crucial part of everything in development. So you say, hey, we're about to install now this 3.12. That's way interesting. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So here we're gonna create now this with only the basics. What the fuck? So we're gonna create now this with the only basic stuff that we need in Vue. All right. And you say, hey, no, the Vue project will be now is called as the. This is the acronym of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar: The Last Airbender forum. All right. We're not going to add TypeScript here, not right now, because we wanted to make things simple as much as possible. No, we're not going to provide any JSX support. This is also that you can actually use. This is something interesting. We want to make simple because this is just a demo purpose of how we can now start using the build tools for building our applications. Okay, so no, we don't want to integrate Vue router, but this is an option. As well as the state management, we don't want that. For VTest, we're supposed to have that. But this is something that we can actually use that. You can now use your A2E integration solutions, whether it's Cypher, Playwright, and that kind of thing, which is a great thing. But in our case, no, we don't want to. Any code quality, yes. For example, the ESLint. Yes, and speed up with OXLint. This is an experimental. Put it here with yes. All right, this ESLint is just as a way to now we write our code following is this certain good practices and to prevent some common errors. Pretty is a way of how we're going to now format our code, pretty much like in an SH where you say, hey, this will be is the two margins or two margins that we want to add to this particularly paragraph. So yes, but here it's a no. Okay, so as you can see, we are now here the atlas. That's right. So we can access to the atlas here and start to see that dig in what was built that way. What was built? All right. So in the public directory, where it only lives the favicon, this is now for the extension that we want to provide with the ESLint. But as you can see here, there is no there is no index. Oh no, there you got it. This is the index HTML. What we're going to inject now is our application. Okay, this is when the view gonna say, hey, this is the entry point for our application, and this is the code that I'm gonna run. So this source main.js is now made of this. So we say, hey, this is how we're gonna create our app. This is the entry point component that we're gonna pass through this. And then let's go to mount this component to that. Let me do the same. As you can see, okay, we're gonna do some migration here. Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do is now migrate is interesting. From the playground here, what we're gonna do is to migrate is from the index.html. Okay, the index.html and open is the .app.view, right? So both of them. Because here is what we're gonna do is this migration. But again, this is something that we're gonna add is on index here, where you say, hey, this is how you can now replace is the title of this. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so just as a way to make this migration, to make things, everything works as expected, we just get rid of this. The template is a valid HTML element, which is what it does is to now tell the browser, hey, I want you to hold this piece of HTML in memory, and at runtime, if I need it, I want you to now add it, put it on the DOM, rendering it. So here we're not gonna do this. Exactly. So here you got is this. All right. So this is now how we're gonna make this migration from the from this. So this is how we're gonna do our migration here, right? No, okay. So what we're gonna do is to actually get all of these elements here. We're gonna pass that here in the templates. Okay. I know it's gonna complain about it because here we need to pass here some sort of unordered list. But what we're getting here is this statistics and all that kind of thing. There's also errors for that. And now let's go to so far let's not go to use this kind of macro or these things called setup. So and also if we want to use now the functionality here, which is now this configuration objects, okay, that will indicate that hey, this is the rendering system object that I want to apply to this HTML. Or in other words, this is the data that I want to keep track, the reactive data, as well as it is methods. And some of this functionality, whether it's computer or watch or methods, makes a lot of sense. So what we're gonna do is to export default, right? This particular object here. Bam. Okay. So this in theory is supposed to work. It's a now the linter is say, hey, please we need you to bind some sort of key as a way to allows us to keep track this in a much more effective way. Similar to React, when you need to pass anytime you render a list of elements, a key attribute to tell behind the scenes to React, hey, I want you to know is uniquely identify these elements. So by the time we need, so when we need to get rid of them, one of these elements, you know which one of these elements was removed, so you can keep track of this list of elements rendering dynamically. Pretty much here. Okay, so that's what we go with it. With this one. Exactly, logic-wise here. Yeah, let me actually add this. So now let me actually bind this property here by adding in some dynamic custom key that I'm going to add this. That'll be is now the vendor. Okay, that'll be now is the vendor type, stat and type. Okay, stat and type. All right, Similar for here.
So I usually just end up tagging in all render stack type that should be a default. Well,
So anytime we wanted to render elements dynamically, we need to tell in this case Vue, hey, I want you to now please keep track of these elements that I'm rendering dynamically here. So you can do some optimizations when I remove or do some operation to those elements. So here the thing is gonna be okay. So for the sake of arguments, is doing now this is even. Okay, even Bender, but I think this is even character exactly. So even character and the index, but index is not being passed. So we're gonna pass that by saying, hey, provide me the index here. Okay, and the same for the favorite list.
that way we basically guarantee that these characters could display at the same time.
Exactly. So here we are now passing this. So the idea here is that they will not get conflict with this, and then we're gonna let it on how discuss how we're going to handle this. There's a lot of here as well. So what we're gonna call this is comma list character. Okay. So comma list characters. Okay, followed by the index, and there you go.
Oh, okay, so this is a fun error. So I actually didn't realize this has been broken. So this is one of the advantages of field tools, because if you look at this error message, it says velse if has no adjacent. If we actually look here, the next element right next to the sibling is actually just a normal. Through the course of like messing around, at some point, we basically moved it way too far from its original. So we look here, this is actually where the normal function is. So we look at this up. So again, just like spell check, right? With build tools like Molar and extensions, make life a lot easier. At the time, I will say I actually had it disabled, so possible it might have caught it, but at the same time, you can't be crazy enough because you have those input times. Run, so that I'm less confident that something actually did that. But something worth doing. Run,
Favorite character here. Oh, because it belongs to this. No favorite character yet. They are not odd character. And that is vif, vlf is now here. And then favorite characters here. Here is not gonna get it. Say, oh, that's right. You got it. What is the error here again? Throw me here. It's like the template root requires exactly one element. This is interesting that it didn't throw any particular error for that.
just like spell check, right? With build tools like Molar, check. Because if you look at this error message, characters, okay. Inside the template, this is where our HTML is going to be. So paste here, you see here that it was good. Yes, error that didn't do anything.
Exactly, because you also is paste is the div ID. As to me was the thing that caused me noise. It's like, really? Div ID, where you say this is the app, right? Similar to this, and there you got it. So as you can see now, when we save this, this is not actually out unless we install Volar. Exactly, unless we install Volar. And now Volar is going to actually indent this, but it's supposed to do that. Here we go. Volar. Oh, even syntax. That's interesting. Angular show TS. Syntax highlight iterating based on Vue syntax. Perhaps it's because I need to restore the server here. Right? How can I restore the server? So you close that and you open that again. This is not actually helping with the auto prefixer. Oh, now it works. Okay, now it works. All right. And here we want is instead of doing the default, exactly. This is the object we want to return from this one. Okay. So this is quite interesting because it's like, What are you running behind? Okay. Yeah, in this case we don't want this particular things, so we just only is running this npm run def here it's a hey, Devtools is on a separate window, which is a great thing. So by the time we actually now show this, it will show then as expected. And if we want to not only access to the Devtool, we can actually access through this as well. Okay, so we have, so now the server is actually running in a different port. Option and Shift plus D in app to toggle the Vue Devtool. They say options and Shift D. Options and Shift D. Okay. Option and Shift. You say get started, and now it's showing this as this particular Devtool here. It's telling us now, oh, okay, this is lovely. It's telling us the version, the page, and the components that we got in here. You can click here, you can see now the components pretty similar to now the component Devtool in React. All right, but you can check if now what is the data that you have now, their states, aka their props. You can also look at the routes that this has been defined. Right now we don't have anyone. The timeline, if we are now, for example, is clicking to something, to some events. All right, and as a way to record it, which is the profiler aspect. And then when we stop this, we would like to see now is was trigger, clear all timelines, so no events. So we can also record is mouse, for example. Say, hey, do this, and this one, and this one. So then I want to stop this. Timelines event can cause significant performance overheat in large applications, so we're coming enabling it only when needed and on the map. So this is now timeline. Okay. Oh, it's because it's not performance. Okay, it's not enabled. That's what happened. Okay. So if we reload this, once we enable this, okay, in timelines event, which is part of the time travel debugging, is something like you say, hey, I'm going to start recording, click here, and click here, and click here, and then stop that, right, to see what happened. That's quite interesting. You say no events, components, or performance. So okay, what if I check the performance of this? And then start tracking here and say, hey, this one, and this one, and this one. And then you stop this. So here what you can see is now what it's doing behind the scene is calling the root and then the render. Calling the root and the render. Patch and the render. So this is what's going on here with this. So for example, if you enable all of this, all right, that's a way to look at the timelines. It's going to record now. It's just for one, and that'll be all. No components events, no keyboard, no mouse. What? Let's do that again. All right. And then you stop that. Okay, but again, I don't want to dive deep too much into this, into the weeds. Okay. And then some assets here that you are not loading. The graph. This is for the code splitting. This is for the code splitting. This is for code splitting. This is for code splitting. Uno CSS. Uno CSS. Uno UI. You see, they're using this Redux behind the scenes as a way to keep track of this, because it's an instant on-demand atomic CSS engine. Okay, so we to explore how you can create this. Alright, that's quite interesting. That's pretty fucked up, by the way. But in any case, yes. But here, this is now for code splitting. Some advanced techniques here as we do this. Alright, and what are the files that we can have here? So to actually check that. Say, hey, I want to find is the app. Say app. Vite inspect. So you can see what it's doing behind the scenes anytime that it's doing that. So now all of these are hosted. And this is now the code that is generating behind the scenes. Transform stack. Okay. Interesting. This is the transform stack. Okay, that's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. All of these are now transforming into Vue Inspector, right? Okay. That now is gonna add some metadata to this. Okay, and they now call Vite and make it now and develop a bundle, an optimized bundle here by creating elements here, and develop an optimized bundle here that is gonna be sent from the Vite server. Okay, holy moly, bro. Okay, move on. And then they came, oh my god, that's pretty fucking powerful, this. That's something interesting, my friend, because now you can have access to that particular file. You say, hey, I want you to access to this, and then you're gonna open up that, and even with the file, Jesus. Exactly. Cut and paste it here.
Then you see that we have all of our logic now scoped to the counter, right? Nothing that's relevant to this counter. And this is great, right? And to be clear, this is not a Vue thing, right? React Angular evolved basically thinking this way as well as keeping our sort of scope to the same file that's easier for people to understand. Now, of course, we got to make sure we move all the stuff that's related though to the counter application, you know? So we have that here, 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 and mostly organized into that. So we cut all that. So what you have here now is we have our scopes, JavaScript, and HTML. So now it's time where we want to actually cut these things. So take a look. You'll notice our counter element is gone. And that's to be expected. We don't need that. But what we haven't done, we haven't actually called our counter. So how does that actually work? Well, just like standard JavaScript, we want to
We can import this component here. Similar the way how you do that in React, which is you import a component, and then you're gonna make use of that.
We have our app done. We're going to import counter. So this is following the file path directly, the directly into this flat one right here. And go up into components. And then we're going to import counter. You'll notice that our extensions are yelling at us because why? It said, hey, you import something you never had. And so the way we actually register a component
Inside of this instance is through the component. Exactly. This is interesting because now, unlike now in React, you don't need, since you are creating a user interface, here you are actually need to indicate what is the component that this particular object or this reactive rendering object now is going. Okay, this is now the. So you're telling here is that, hey, this particular object that represents now this reactive rendering system, okay, is gonna handle is not only the reactive data, but also is the method as well as the component that it depends on this. This is interesting. As well as some other logics around that.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. So the observation is pointed out here that my methods when I copy and pasted was copy pasting that from one to this out. There you go. Now that makes much better. Yeah, that's better. Okay, there we go. And now we need to actually use it. How to use it? Well, use a custom component. So whatever beneath it.
But it's the idea of doing this in the component is because now, since this is a reactive rendering system, now you not only need to define is the reactive data as well as it is method attached to that, like that can operate on this data, whether it's computer property or watchers. This is mainly for side effects, okay, so Ajax requests or a browser API communications, local storage, listening for an event, but also is the components that now you are going to keep track of. Where unlike React, we only care about is that this component will have now, this component will render this, and it have its own property that is going to accept, and it's going to now render is this JSX elements. So one input, one output. But here, the thing is that this is not one input, one output. What I mean, this is one input, but this input is not a primitive, it's not a simple value. Is this now a configuration object for the reactive rendering system? For the reactivity, compilers optimize rendering system. Holy moly. Oh, yeah.
And chain as well. There we go.
Without that, it.
We can look at that. The main thing about that is being consistent. That's the only thing it has. It doesn't matter what you choose, just be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've done that, we have the first component. Let's go ahead and play around with creating your own components from there. So the exercise here is to basically go inside of your forum app, so whether it's Office or Community or whatever, and then look at your index.html file. You go create one of your sister companies, and to give some preface as well, you'll run into a limitation here, quickly as far as things go. But I want to just get you access to these files. Just know that it will functionally be broken once we get that. Looking good. So you can basically try scoping, like putting stuff together.
And each one of these instances you're going to also define is the props.
Hopefully you all had some fun creating components. I was just walking around.
Mm-hmm.
You probably ran into a problem basically when you started migrating stuff because a lot of your code is dependent on multiple things. So you might have started moving stuff that it's like, wait, where is this thing first going to sync with? You had trouble talking to it. So let's go ahead and show you what I mean. So let me start by opening up my app browser. And so as you can see here, we have a couple sections here that could really make sense. So you can see a bunch of H2. It could make sense as components or something like this, as far as like starting with characters, this is the character list. And so let's actually try something as simple as that. Let's go ahead and start by starting with
Mm-hmm.
the character list.
Okay. But here is gonna have this one.
Click a little bit. Start by bringing over all of your H2.
Okay, this is now a way of how we're going to actually encapsulate this particular logic into their own components, right? Something that I'm quite familiar with, right? You can define is now the character list, and the another will be is the.
Template is a short form. So the app.view is at the very top. And what we really want is the ability to have the app push down into shells and create as easy as possible. And then after that, okay, so now we do that. Script. It doesn't show up. No errors. That's decent. Let's test this. Let me try to call them.
I just want to make sure that.
Let's rethink that over. Because what we really want is the ability to have the app push down into shells components, right? Single direction data flow in and out of your exercising components here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a series. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at how we should be componentizing here. Again, the app.view is at the very the statistics are going to get us solve the problem template. This is a nice place.
Mm-hmm.
So as we can see here, we have a couple sections here that could really make sense. Potentially, they could make sense as components as far as like these are characters, this is a character list. And so let's actually try something as simple as that. Let's go ahead and start by setting up let's go ahead and
Oh my god, it's close all of this. Well,
this time flip it a bit.
cursor.
So save that. A lot of stuff can be missing. Then here, this is where it gets a little tricky. Okay, what do we want to do? Well, we know the character list here is right. Let's start by exporting the default character list. This is an object that is this character list is here. Then what else we got? Well, we got that. We got length. This is good. Actually, oh, we're actually here. We have a favorite character. Okay. Ah, yes. That is a really good character. So I'm just going to copy the whole block. That's probably what you started doing. And then you're like, oh yes, there's also this not favorite list. Okay, great. Import character list from components character list. That. And I'm going to register my component character list. Hobby came in, I'll take it again. I'm going to call my character list component.
Vector can find tsconfig file or gsconfig file. Wait, what? Why not? What the fuck again? Okay. Okay. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. All right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. What the fuck? Come on, man. Oh my god, really? Hey, 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 hello. What's wrong with this? Don't tell me that. Oh shit. Oh my god. Anyway, Jesus. And now, by the time you do this, it'll actually work as expected. Okay, it's because I hadn't, yeah, good. Now that I have all of these things going on, now I can show this as expected. Okay. So the idea here is to modularize all of this into its own components, right?
Now take a look at what's happening. Look at the ESX file.
But all of this is that you are register recording is to this reactivity rendering, to this reactivity compiler optimized reactive uh, uh, rendering system, that this is all the thing that it needs to keep track of, whether it is props as well as the events that you're gonna emit. But it makes a lot of sense right now to understand how the things work. Perhaps the dynamic, the details of that is something that we know, but it's understanding now the bigger picture of this is that I'm passing now a configuration object where I'm going to register is all of the things that this reactive rendering system, compiler optimized rendering systems, actually is going to do behind the scenes, right? And that is keep track of the state under the data, as well as the method you can apply to the state, whether it's the methods and the transformation that you can apply. So, for example, computer property or watch, what computer properties for data transformations and watch is for side effects. Method is for when you want to now define some handlers on the HTML, all right, based on a particular event. We also look at how you can now bind that data to any attributes and then listen for an event using some of the directive that they provide. And by the time that you now need to create more component-based applications, following from top to down, now using the single file components is a way of how you can do that, right? So you are now integrating all of these little piece of Lego pieces, or Vue UI interface Lego pieces to work each other's.
Personally, I am not a fan of passive function components. Basically, just because I know that, especially when you're programming, you get caught up in like you have to do functions, right? You have to do components, where it becomes very easy to like parasite everything. And so that's why I think one of the reasons it got popular is passive function components. Because if you say, as a parent, I'm going to tell the child what to learn. But what I found with that a lot of times is that now you're starting to inflate the, like I feel like the parent starts to do too much in terms of like, if the scope of the child is meant to be mentoring, I found very few times where it didn't make sense for the child to be target function. Yeah. Okay. Yep. 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 So that is actually when you put it in after the exercise, it's like I'll call it what I consider the more standard pattern. So to recap briefly, is that let's go back to the example brought up inside of my avatar right now.
Is that how you can now emit events from a parent component?
But for the favorite character list, as was mentioned, if you were to break out favorite character like into its own component, it's tricky because at this point, favorite list is also dependent on like there's like the data exists with the parent, and so you don't necessarily want to pass the data into the child for the child to modify, but at the same time, then it sounds like it would be better to then pass a function to the child and tell it what to do, right? But I'll leave that a little bit on the cliffhanger, but just know that there's a better way to pass a function.
Special function as props.
First a chance to tap into the props approach, and then I'll insert context switching. Very easy to learn. That's really important as a model of what development is.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break here, as it is. But what we're doing here is to say, hey, you know what? Let's go. This is pretty interesting stuff. Coño, que me interesó, tú sabes. Coño, tú sabes qué, más que todo por los resultados, por una palabra, resultado. Y que justamente en el caso de los deportistas o atletas, eh, se nota enormemente que ellos necesitan dar resultados también. ¿Por qué menciono eso? Bueno, porque especialmente cuando uno está trabajando ahorita, ¿no? Uno quiere es dar resultados. Y no solamente si lo llevas al ámbito laboral, sino también al ámbito personal. Entonces, ejemplo, si tú quieres por lo menos sentirte bien contigo mismo a la hora de verte bien, ¿ok? Entonces hay ciertas cosas que tú tienes que hacer para lograrlo, para obtener esos resultados. Y cuando tú empiezas a quizás a orientar tu vida un poco más hacia esos resultados que necesitas, ¿ok? No que quieres, que necesitas, entonces las cosas van a ir un poco más fáciles para ti. O sea, te la estás poniendo a tu yo del futuro, no en 4, sino en 2. ¿No? Hello, Shaq.
What, you don't look a little tagged? Were you just in Ibiza?
I was just actually in Ibiza, yeah. How'd you know?
That's
Yeah,
a
it was
really
just
deep tag.
partying in Marbella, you know,
What was
like
your last
going
name?
crazy. Well, it's actually, yeah, it's ramen.
Like the noodles?
They're trying to get the ramen in here. Yo, oh, suck it in.
Para trabajar en una casa de República Dominicana. Pues claro que sí. ¿Cómo fue que tú dijiste que sí, que tanto, que no hay problema? ¿Cómo se dice? Pásame el control que está encima de la meseta. Pásame la vaina que está encima de la vaina. Y si yo te mando el colmado, ¿qué harías? Si confiado y que lo anoten en el cartoncito. ¿Cómo se dice? Yo hice narguaco, jarineando. Y si me estoy bañando.
Okay. But that was quite interesting. You see, was very interesting because now we say, okay, so now that we know, so now that we know that we are subscribing this several, so we're telling to this machine, hey, please keep track the state of your application in a reactive way, and when that happens, I'm going to update that. So I can just describe what are the data that I want you to keep track, the method, that's the functional mechanism to do that, as well as other programs that I need you to keep track of, which is the component run, which is the process. It's another one. As well as the event that you can emit as well from these components. See, look, it's actually really easy to explore. And how also is you can now is pass the data through that using slots. For Oslo, bro. Oslo. Oslo. Oh. Self-discovery, bro. That's what I'm doing. It's a freaking self-discovery. Oh, shit. Oh, nigga. Oh, nigga. Oh, nigga. Nigga, 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 nigga. 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 Nigga what? Nigga what? That's all I'm gonna say. Nigga what? All right. Mm-hmm.
We did get a great question here in the chat. So is this around the idea of when a lot of real world apps, a lot of times we're getting large sets of data from them, right? And so the basic question is like user details. And so if you create a component like a user card, how might you enforce this? So again, just for the sake of not just me talking,
If you use user.
See, John Doe cheeseburgers. And then, as a result, what we get is now, okay, let's say, let's do this and do this cheeseburger. Well, in that case, we'll do it in main. Pass, and then state, that is good, default path. Here, one, and also, and so, again, it's one of those things I think with experience you'll come to figure out, like, one, when is it too many? So I would say that is actually a legitimate problem. If you have a code you're breaking down your object, you can have like 10 lines of copy, then you don't want to do that all the way. But again, feel it out. Figure out like what is your limit. Once I start getting past like 25 cops, I start wondering if I could maybe manipulate the database past like precise cops. But again, it's one of those things where you'll have a style. I love it. Okay. So the question here is that then with the same concept, right? You then use a computer property to pass it down instead. I think that's a great example. So once again, let's take this example.
Yeah.
If I want to say only pass down from main, I could say call it find, for example. Find user data basically just means that returns after the whole.
But it'll be very hard to maintain now the data that we're passing. Again, this adapt to the needs. It's a fix. This is not a solution, a sustainable solution. Transform that in the data level, bro. It's because computer return name
Okay.
computer return name. Oh, okay, exactly.
Okay. So there you go. That's an example of passing down just the data. Oh, okay. It did work. Just at the same time. Okay. So there you go. That's an example of passing down just the data into components that you didn't have to worry about. So once again, I always part as far as like feeling out what makes the most sense because of that level of complexity. Because if you
No, no, no.
say most of the time it's not worth integrating.
Especially if you're gonna work with data structure, if you're gonna work with app level state data, put it all make all of these transformations in that store, right? Make all of the transformations in that store. Exactly. But if you need to define some specific UI state, alright, then you can do some computation and that kind of thing.
This is the entire thing for like, there's a lot of stuff in here that you probably don't need. You probably need like one image, maybe the number it is, maybe the terminal. But like, this is an example of how data. So once again, there are different approaches to handle this. All right. Yes.
When you do pass properties, is this a passive library or is it passive
Exactly. Is this passed by a reference or is this passed by a value? Interesting.
Okay. So the question here is that when you pass in this find user,
Well, in theory, we are passing as a new object. Because you're generating is this, you are actually generating as a new object.
So when it comes to props, that actually does work out pretty nicely. Maintaining props, generally speaking, is not a good idea. What you don't want to do is come in here and be like, oh yes, I want for method change name this dot user.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, this leads into the question that we had earlier regarding, well, if that's the case, are you saying that like my child can go to the end before? No. But before we move on to that, does anyone have any questions about that? Anything like you want to talk about?
The data changes on the side of the Redux instead of on top of this.
Yeah, it'll know basically which one parts of how it's changing. That's one of the advantages of using all the export functions. We can dance around this topic a lot, and I love to mention it. So as a recap on the context right now, at this point we're talking about children components and trying to figure out how the heck to update them. Because we've talked about the fact that, well, you don't want to mutate obsolete things, right?
Which is by emitting consistent components.
On the other hand, we talked about passive functions that we have implemented.
But again, all of these are focuses on from the HTML perspective. They are not focuses on the web perspective. You know, the designer's focuses on this specific thing, and that's what you can have. For example, define is an emit event of that, and then register that.
Take on reference to that language, then we have this change where the function that's like most people's instinctual way of how
Instinctual way of how you're gonna do this.
parent is telling you what to change, the child immediately does it.
But in the view,
On is that it will go to the fact that it actually creates a web element. When we have the child done element,
we have the bubble of effect.
that's actually how the code is not actually the parent telling what to do.
It's saying
That how
it's
this happened. It bubbles up that event. That's where we get these concepts that, oh, click has happened. Therefore, how does
so. This is also one of the reasons why we actually is emitting events, because it's mimicking this behavior of how now the HTML actually works.
tell the parent
Is that hey, this event is gonna bubble up.
go ahead and just
You're gonna go to the target and then bubble up.
so let's go ahead and just set this
And not only that, because it is something that is intuitive, or it is adopting the web standards. So it's also using this concept, as the slot, as a way to now pass down data to this distinct component.
is that if we click a button
But using it as a slot.
without passing a change, then the basically works. So this is your before, and this is now where the Devtools application it actually does give out like to change things one to one. On your component, you get the ability to listen to what the user wants to change. This is coded for you later. Questions here? Let's be clear what you're going to do when this is called.
What is it called? I wanna run is this one.
Because now all of a sudden that function is like, have you seen a code base code? This gets very old. Then you start passing in the wrong things. Then you have to make sure the function that you want it to is the child, which means you actually now have to train the parent to make sure that it kind of makes sense. Whereas like with just emit event, this child can have a lot of context, and then the parent can do whatever it wants with it. It makes sense for the child. But the child can know that that's what the business is. So in that regard, the ability to change on the social component also really
Yep. And you're saying it's
It did not. And so that's a great question. Because, okay, so the question here is that right now we just have two parents.
Right now we have a single parent, exactly. But what happens when we need to parent grandchild, which is something that happens in a lot of React applications. The way how you can do, and the way how you can handle that, is that in React sense, it's like you bubble up that event, and then you pass down the data. But as a way to now prevent this kind of bubbling things, especially when we need to pass down that data to distant child components or grandchild components known as purpose drilling. Now React say, hey, this particular thing that is something that is common, especially if you compose all of these React components, now it is time for us to is have a context for them. We can put all of these state that are common across all of these subtree of React components, and then you can now have access to that using the use context hook as a way to now read to the data from that, and then return is that particular states. Here, the point of this is that with the emit, the idea of emitting event is that I was going to make this relationship between parent and child, no more. Mm-hmm.
Is prompts actually have those prompts. So the pattern that actually enable parent prompted. So yeah, app.view has this global thing and then draw, pop, 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 pop. It's like none of the components use it until like this screen. But then the problem with prompt drilling is that the moment you remove one in the middle, the whole thing just falls apart.
The whole
And if this
the whole
pattern
thing falls apart immediately.
and the same thing with end, right? Because at that point I would argue
Mm-hmm.
data that you share across components like that, it probably makes sense for you to have like a module that you share across components. The prompt is really, in my mind, designed for sharing content components. You want it to behave this way. Otherwise, what we'll see here later on is that other flexible APIs allow you to do more than just
For example, like slots here.
okay,
Oh, is that is an equivalent emitted view too?
okay, so good question. In regards to Vue 2, $sign emit actually does exist. So
Mm-hmm.
but let's not around. What is maintainable here is technically using
Is that you can document here to do that?
because the problem, this is a good step one, is that when you don't have this emit property, it seems like a small thing. But if you start creating multiple events, it starts getting really hairy to track of like, wait, what events are happening, where is it? I mean, that's why we have pop filters too, actually. Just letting you know, hey, what am I expecting to see? Emit does the opposite. What kind of events?
What kind of event that do you expect you to emit to keep track of this?
If you don't like emitting events here, you can actually just
Mm.
this one doesn't get method. This one. It's up to you. You want it here. Well, it's just this one event. I don't like that much. I'm just going to put it. On the other hand, you have a whole bunch of places you might not want to put that everywhere, but here's your
But it's all about is keep tracking of all of these kind of things. Very, very interesting here. Very, very interesting.
kind of some knowledge. The exercise now is to kind of continue on your component exploration. Now you have basically the opportunity to architect your components however you see fit. You want to go ahead and just have display components that receive data from the user, and then if it makes changes, you give back methods, or you want to start from the top. Figure out how you want to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, and we're back. So, one of the questions that came up with the exercise is like there's a blank around, and what you'll notice is that if you mutate the top, everything does seem to turn left. So in other words, if you're in here, for example, this all of a sudden becomes a lot trickier to figure out why everything is left. Whereas if you follow the tools that we have, you basically have to do, I guess we've implemented this. So the thing about we have to remember when to use emit top and down relationship. And the problem we're trying to solve here is a simple relationship. The character part is usually vendor syntax, or left-hand side syntax. Favorite character is the character part, and we're trying to talk about it.
Exactly. So what we can do is now put this state at the top.
And so usually what happens at that point is where you want to try to basically what you do is you have stores, and you probably would have favorite store because you file the name. You also want to make sure that you have that. That way you don't have to. And in fact, what's kind of interesting though is that once you have these stores, sometimes the emit goes away actually. And now you're actually not thinking about
Exactly.
you're just updating the store. And so that can do a lot of really good things. But I want to at least start with the fundamental.
You have a particular state that now all of these components are going to consume, and by the time one of these state that is shared across all of these two components change, it's going to be reflected there.
It makes sense, right? If you go down to like components,
Mhm.
but let's for a second think of a component. So for this base button component, probably are thinking, well, it's a button component. What kind of prop would I want to pass? Well, think about it.
Exactly. So this is when things start to get tricky. If you need to actually pass all of this, especially when you need to pass a lot of props to that, you can use this as slot, okay, where you say, hey, in my parent, I'm going to define is now what are the slots that I'm going to trigger in my child component. This is now the elements that I want to render, this subset of elements that I want to render. And that's exactly what you can do with this here. You can also put names to this slot to say, hey, I want you to now render this subset of elements or another this one. This is also interesting because it's useful for creating now this visual representation or this UI, because you can tell that, hey, if we are now from the padding component, if we are now on the web, I want you to show this particular layout, this slot. All right, it's like, hey, if you're building a dashboard, this is the sidebar, this is the content, right? However, if we are now on the mobile, all right, okay, so let me, this is interesting because if we are in the mobile, we can use this the resize API to actually detect the to actually detect that this is the where the resize kicks in. This is where the resize kick in. It's to, hey, I want you to now detect, is this dimension of these elements, and this is way beyond some particular trace point. I want you to now set this. I want you to trigger a callback here, which means is that I want you to now is define this as the layout for that. So define now this as a responsive design. So we can put this now observer in this event. This is quite interesting. We can now put this. We can put now this event, this resize event here, this resize API to actually listen to this particular element, and if that element exceeds certain layout, we can actually shift to that, but again, programmatically. We can do that is programmatically. And one of the great thing of this is that because it was designed for to cover this particular use case, we can make sure that it will do that in the most performant way possible.
Like what text you want to run. Doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what we do? Well, there is a built-in element called slot. So it's globally available to your app at all times. So C component and slot. If you think about it, it actually functions just as a built-in node. So rather than being like, oh, I wanted to say arrow and then dash high, this is a base button.
Okay.
Call it like a normal component and then just say.
Hey, what you to now pass is the.
If you're looking at this going like, isn't that HTML? Just like HTML. Why complicate things together, right? There are times when you just want to let people define whatever they want inside of your component. Now, granted, actually, things regarding things.
So this is, for example, like a framework like Quasar actually are doing behind the scene, because you say, hey, there you got it, right? Enterprise ready cross-platform UGS framework. So Hapag-Lloyd. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the using is now this. It's quite actually fast, by the way. And again, this is all static data. Okay, this is all static data here. You can also show all of this particular data that you need to and explore that. You know, all of these are data from that. This is not real-time data, by the way. Or yes, it is. Is this real-time data? Okay, Hapag-Lloyd. Oh, that's right. Okay, because this is now logistic, maritime logistic. Interesting. In Argentina, they have only one place. Okay, in USA, you got only this one. Interesting. Miramar. And all the people involved there for that. For real? You shouldn't have. Well, okay. Inland cargo fleet and our company or business suite. So interesting. Very, very interesting here. Very, very, very interesting. All right. Interesting. If you're a more advanced Vue developer, we will invite you to start off by deciding between all Quasar flavors. Whether it's Vue or Webpack, strongly recommend the Premium DX, UMD standalone, Vue plugin, Vue CLI plugin. Interesting. If you're using Quasar with Vue, you're gonna have this ability to embed an existing project, progressive integration of Quasar, include Quasar public from VCN, server-side rendering, mobile, desktop. This is interesting. It's because one single frame will allow you to now deploy all of this. Okay, so you have now Quasar, you have now Vue and React Native, as well as using Xcode as well. All right, and all of the components that you can go with. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, as well as the layout and grid. Okay, layout drawer, that kind of thing. View directive, close pop-up, material mutation, view directive, mutation, for example, is using the mutation observer API. So here we're gonna take a look at now these particular elements, and by the time any of this property change, props or content change, we want to actually trigger something here. Drag and drop desktop only here, and the mutation info. Exactly, but using is now the mutation for that. Use okay, interesting. I built a mutation observer, but this was just to mimic the behavior, or is to mimic the text-based behavior. I already made. Okay. Scroll files and scroll observer. scroll observer that is using what? The resize observer API. It's like, hey, by the time this element change its dimensions, I want to trigger now something. I want to run a callback. Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. I get it. Exactly. So we to cover some of the most common use cases here. Interesting. Quasar plugin, that kind of thing. And by the time you want to deploy that, view composables. Exactly, which is some of these composable functions that you can go with. Use meta, use hide rotation, use ID, interval, render, catch, tick. Security. That's quite interesting. Very, very interesting. Holy moly, bro. But they have now but they have this particularly, or Platinum sponsor, full sponsor list. Dream Monkey, Hapag-Lloyd, iRewind, Stisha, Kalisha, even DigitalOcean is using this. DigitalOcean is using Quasar? Accord Settable? Holy moly. Sponsor Quasar help the project growth. Of course, because it has all of these particular things to act upon that. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's very, 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 very interesting. Absolutely.
Again, in the very next video, is sort of how do you think? So the question here, sort of, that's one of the things that always excites me in looking at how the API is defined. Extensibility of the web. So I need to do that. So again here, is that works. That is traditional prompt selector stuff gets really painful because
Exactly, because now on the pattern here, or on the base layout, here is
flow. But again, if you look at MDN, template is an actual closed cycle. So of course, there's nowhere to go.
so by the time that we're now going to add, exactly, this is the base layout. So by the time you want to use this, hey, I'm telling you this template with this directive, and this template is this now this HTML that I'm storing in memory, telling the browser store this in memory, and by the time that this actually match the visload SI, you want this to is in this case is sidebar.
There we go. So let's give this just a little bit of styling just so that we can see what So you're saying that if I don't... Yep. Good question. The answer is yes. Because as far as view is concerned, what you're saying is this is the scaffold. Expect it to render.
That'll be a very interesting exercise here. But that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.